A word of warning, this podcast explores graphic and disturbing stories and includes some strong language. It therefore may not be suitable for our young listeners or other folks who may find it disturbing. Hello and welcome to True Crime News, the podcast covering high-profile and under-the-radar cases from across the country every week. I'm your host, Ana Garcia, and our case this week, a family of 5 is slaughtered. An 11-year-old girl survives by pretending to be dead. The accused killer, her 15-year-old brother. They are the only two to survive. Their parents and siblings gone. Can we really say that all they have is each other now? How will that little girl survive the agony of all of this loss and at the hands of her big brother, say police? It is just too much pain for one family and one community to bear. We are recording this on Friday, November 8th, 2024. Our guest today is Dr. Tracy Tamborra, a nationally recognized expert on domestic violence and crime. Tracy is also a criminal justice professor at the University of New Haven in Connecticut, a dear friend of the show. We're always so excited when you're here. Tracy, welcome back.
Thank you so much, and congratulations to you for your new show. I've been following it. You're really, you're not just an inspiration to always keep victims' voice forward, but you're always looking for new platforms to give victims that voice. I appreciate that, Anna.
Oh, Tracy, thank you. You are very kind with your words. Thank you. You touch my heart deeply, and we have massive respect for you and the work that you do. You're one of the favorites on the podcast. Everyone loves to hear your perspective. And that's what I love about all our guests. Everyone comes from a different part of the criminal justice system, and everyone has a different perspective. And maybe if we all have a conversation, we'll have a better understanding, and understanding hopefully leads to change and improving things.
I agree. Yeah.
But sadly, we have a case today where the level of violence and the carnage is horrific. 5 members of a family have been murdered in a small town, Fall City, Washington. The family is described as deeply religious, conservative, raising their children, homeschooling them. And I think when we hear that we have incredibly protective parents who are very careful about exposing their children to the world and the horrors of the world, and then something as evil as this, invades their home, it's very jarring, very jarring.
Yeah. And I think it, of course, as a criminologist, I'm often asked to comment on cases that gain media attention because of the salacious nature of the case, right? This is a family that, as you said, appeared to be trying to insulate or protect their children from the dangers of the world, but those dangers were already developing inside, and we don't have a lot of information, right? So we have no idea what the dynamics of the family were like yet. This is a fairly new case that's unfolding. So, but I think you really point out a very important point here, that in their attempt to insulate and protect their child, something about the child rearing could become a factor. I don't know yet. We need more information.
We do. And I don't like to shy away from a case that maybe we don't have all the answers, because I think it's very important to have a conversation. This is especially because the person charged here is a 15-year-old with he's charged with killing his entire family, and his little sister, who's just 11 years old, she was shot, she says, by him. Yep. And she survived by playing dead, because she said he went around the house checking on every individual.
Sure.
And if she hadn't played dead and then convinced him that she was dead, when he left the room, she says that she ran out a window and got to a neighbor and called 911. She is the surviving witness, but she has no family now to support her.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we're going to get into all of the dynamics here about what's it going to be like for her to be a victim witness in a trial against her only surviving immediate family member. What does this mean for her ability to heal moving forward, right? We, as a victim, somebody who studies victimization, we know how difficult it can be for victims of crime whose family member is the perpetrator to sort out their feelings between, repulsion, anger, negativity, but that's my brother, I love him. So she's going to have to grapple with some very tough emotions as she moves forward and matures.
Yeah, I don't know how she's going to do that. I really don't. I just, that to me is always the power of survivors and their ability to either heal or move forward, to me, is where I gain some strength, because I learn from everyone, because I don't know that I would have the strength. I don't know that I would have the strength to find my way through something as horrible as this. So hopefully she will have all the support anyone could possibly give her. So the accused killer here is her 15-year-old brother. The two have not been named publicly because they are minors. The murder victims have been named, and this is a massacre of an entire family. This is the Humiston family. The murdered are the two parents, Mark, who's 43, Sarah, the mother, 42, along with their three children, Catherine, who was 7, Joshua, who was 9, and Benjamin, 13. The investigation is complicated for a lot of reasons. First of all, the 15-year-old who is suspected here, the alleged killer, according to police and according to his sister's first comments to police, staged the crime scene to make it look like the 13-year-old brother, the one who's dead, Benjamin, actually did it, and that he, the 15-year-old, is a victim. So this is complicated, so I want to repeat it one more time. Investigators say that the 15-year-old who has been charged with this mass murder of a family is claiming that his dead brother, who's, a few years younger, who's 13, is really the one who did it. And police say there was a staging of a gun and everything. That, if that is true, right, because we don't know yet, that is diabolical.
Sure. Yeah. So, right, you're talking about elements of a criminal case, premeditation, and then the immediate after effects, where the individual then takes precautions or measures to cover up the offense. So it's going to be very difficult to say the individual was not sane. It's going to be difficult to say that the individual didn't possess what we call mens rea, a guilty mind in the criminal justice system. And this is going to, I think, affect whether or not the case is moved to from juvenile court to an adult court. And I don't know if you want to talk about that now, but I think that's—
Sure, why not? I mean, because we're going to get into we've given everyone like the headline. This is essentially, because we don't know a lot about the case, but one of the holdups here is that they're trying to figure out whether they're going to move this into an adult court. And, I'm a firm believer. It's like, listen, by 15, you know what's right and wrong. And if you pull this off, right, if there's enough evidence against you, you should be tried as an adult, because if not, then this young man is going to be released probably by the time he's 25.
Right. And so I'm going to be pedantic for a second and put a couple of professorial statements out there. I know sometimes your audience is like, I love that. And then other times like, oh my God, is she crazy? No. So just so we're clear, I'm just going to put ideas on the table. Okay. Moving a child, somebody who we consider to be a minor in the state that they are in, they haven't reached the age of consent in that state, to an adult court requires a bunch of provisions and a review of the case facts. And it really should. Like, I get it. I get the general public. You hear this 15-year-old person massacred their family in cold blood, premeditated, and then also called to try to pin it on the brother he just murdered. We don't like this person. Nobody likes this person. Nobody feels sorry for this person. But the criminal justice system is not developed on a case-by-case basis. It's developed to ensure a set of rights is afforded to everyone so that when they move through a process, it is fair as fair can be, right? That's, who knows what fair means. We're not there yet. 200 years, maybe we'll figure it out. But so you don't want 15-year-olds who like go to CVS and like put candy bars in their pocket being tried as an adult, right?
Correct.
So, but why? So we kind of have to have a premise. Are 15-year-olds adults or not? We can't just base it on the crime that they commit. So that's the first piece. We're trying to have some sort of stable metric for deciding when juveniles go forward based on age and development, not necessarily only based on crime. So that's the first point that needs to be kind of unpacked. The second point is there's a lot of discussion. My students know it, so I know your viewing audience knows this because we love true crime stories, and true crime is now becoming about understanding, neurological or psychological elements, such as the frontal lobe development, right? We've all heard this now in the news. Well, the frontal lobe doesn't develop till 18 to 25, depending on the sex of the individual, the maturation process. So can they really be held responsible? I just want to point out frontal lobe should be considered, right? We don't want somebody, for instance, in the 60s, we put to death individuals who were cognitively delayed. They had Down syndrome. They had something else. We probably do not want to go back to that time. So we do want to consider neurological development. That being said, there's a difference between saying somebody isn't as neurologically developed as an adult and somebody knew what they were doing is wrong.
Aren't those two radically different concepts?
Right. And that's what we haven't figured out quite yet in the criminal justice system. So to put this into a nutshell, stuff that requires, right, a whole semester of conversation, like let's imagine we're 100% certain the facts of the case are as they are. The 15-year-old possessed a guilty mind. They knew right from wrong, so much so that they called the police and said it was someone else because they were aware they would get in trouble, right? Mm-hmm. Where the consideration of do we move them to adult court from juvenile court is really about the punishment. And this is what the general public sometimes doesn't get this. If you're in the juvenile court, you just get until 20, in the state of Washington, it's 25 years, and then you are available for release. Where at
the age of 25.
At the age of 25.
At the age of 25, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so... And this is where, because the conversation we always have on this podcast is, what would justice look like in this case? Because I believe that communities determine much of the reaction and should be part of the conversation. Every community is different. Okay. But I do not think that if he is found guilty, and we don't know innocent until proven guilty, I'm sorry, if he is found guilty, let's say in a juvenile court of having massacred his family, getting out at 25 is not justice.
Sure.
No.
Sure.
No.
And so that's where the third point comes in. I think most of us have this idea that the prison system is justice. We don't have any data to suggest that the prison systems are doing a very good job at rehabilitating people.
Oh, I think most people get that. I think, right? Good. Don't you think so? I think most people, and I give most people a lot of credit, a prison is punishment. Rehabilitation, I think that can happen in some cases, right? We have seen it. Is it a standard? I don't think so. And that's a detour that I don't want to take right now in the podcast, only because, that one is so far down the road for us on this case. But I appreciate the distinction that you have pointed out for us, because this is a struggle, I think, for many of us. What do we do with a 15-year-old? Should he or he not be tried as an adult? I think we're all going to have a conversation on YouTube and social media about that, which is very important. And yes, the whole concept of do you know it's right? Do you know it's wrong? I think so. And for those of us who are parents, we get that frontal lobe barrier, as I would say. We get that. And yes, and young people do not make the best choices. Right. But there is a difference between a choice and murder. Are you confused about when and how to start investing? I remember when words like IRAs and portfolios were another language, but investing doesn't have to be scary or hard. Today's episode is sponsored by Acorns. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing for you, your kids, and your retirement. You don't need a lot of money or expertise to invest with Acorns. In fact, you can get started with just your spare change. Acorns recommends an expert-built portfolio that fits you and your money goals, then automatically invests your money for you. And now Acorns is putting their money into your future. Open an Acorns Later IRA and get up to a 3% match on new contributions. That's extra money for your retirement. Investing and planning for your future can be complicated, but it's important to think ahead and prepare. Acorns is a great and easy way to get started. Head to acorns.com/truecrime or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. Paid non-client endorsement compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/truecrime. So let's get back to the case. Because as you've said, Dr. Tamborra, he called 911 himself and told his story. And so there were competing 911 calls that were coming in telling two different stories about the murders that just took place in this house. Very, very interesting. I want to talk about how challenging it may be for this family in particular, if they were a very religious, conservative family, Tracy, and the fact that they homeschooled their children, they were so involved in their children's lives that they, according to published reports, determined what types and who would be the children's friends in an attempt, we think, obviously, to protect them. What happens when you have an incredibly religious family like this? And I don't know whether the rest of the family units, in the extended family are like this. Is there a consideration in there as to, what effects that may or may not have had on what was going on in that house?
I was unprepared for that question, but so in criminology, we have a variable called religiosity, and we do measure if individuals engage religiosity, if it's high or low. So if you are a very practicing member of a religious organization, it's high and not low. And we have studied the relationship between religiosity and crime, and it lowers, right? So more religious families are apt to report less crime. One of the things for me as a victimologist who's in particular studied domestic violence, knowing that crime isn't reported, I'm always interested, are they reporting less crime because there's less crime, or is there actually less crime? So we don't have a lot of research to know if there are lower rates of crime being reported in families or communities with high rates of religiosity because it's actually legitimate, or they're less apt to report. So that's something. Yeah.
Fascinating. Oh, you're just filled with so much information, Dr. Tamborra.
Yeah. Yes. Tell my children that. Tell my children that, Anna.
It's that frontal lobe there, Tracy.
Waiting it out.
Yes, waiting it out. There you go. Okay, so now also about the family. According to police, there were at least 2 Glock handguns in the residence, and the surviving sister told news outlets that her 15-year-old brother, the one who's charged here, the suspected shooter, was the only child who knew the code to the lockbox. So one would think that they trusted this child as the oldest sibling to have the combination to the gun safe.
Sure. Which indicates, I think the family was very blindsided. I don't think they had any reason to believe that this child posed a threat to them, which is very interesting. Maybe in the next 6 months, we'll find out that there were red flags, but right now it doesn't appear because he did have the combination.
Yeah, as if he would be the oldest sibling to be in charge in the event something
happened. They were
happened.
out of the house, then he would have right. Yeah, he would have. Yeah.
So these murders unfolded in the early hours of October 21. According to the Daily Mail, the survivor, She saw the body of her father, Mark, and the 9-year-old brother, Joshua, in the hallway, all bloodied. Then she witnessed her brother, right, the 15-year-old, gun down the youngest one, the 5-year-old, Catherine. We already know she has experienced horrific terror. This trauma is unbelievable to see your dead relatives. But if she indeed did witness, she claims, her brother shooting her little sister, those images, that is horrific trauma.
Yeah, she's going to need to unpack this trauma for many years. This is the type of trauma you may learn to cope with, but probably not move on from.
No.
And also, one of the things that was interesting in reading the news reports of this is that, she played dead, right? And we've seen this in other mass shootings. This is technically classified as a mass shooting because there's 4 more victims. So we've seen this in other mass shootings in which young children as young as 6 years old at Sandy Hook, knew to play dead. I mean, this is kind of a sad state of affairs that children are aware when there's a mass shooting that one option for them is to play dead. Yeah. Instinctually, because I doubt they've learned this behavior somewhere. Yeah.
And that is so interesting that your instinct so young can already truly be it's there. There's nothing we can do. Your instinct is there. You can't control it. It just is. It's so fascinating to me. So she ran to her bedroom when she saw all of this, and he followed her, according to the reports of the Daily Mail. He shot her in the neck and the hand. That's where she pretended to be dead. She said he stood there watching her. Mm-hmm. Those seconds must have felt like years.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And also that she then had the mental wherewithal, not only to play dead, but then to get out the window. Another buzzword in criminology and victimology is resilience. This is a very resilient child, and that might be able to help to get her through what she's going to have to go through to move from victim to survivor in her healing process. But very strong, very resilient child.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. So she ran out the window to a neighbor. So let's get to these dueling 911 calls that are truly baffling. The first call to 911 was made before 5 a.m. by the accused shooter in this case, according to police. Okay? He makes the first 911 call. The teen told authorities that his brother, Benjamin, the 13-year-old who is now dead, had shot and killed the family before turning the gun on himself. Then he allegedly told dispatch that his 13-year-old brother had killed everyone out of revenge. I mean, the 15-year-old, because this is all recorded, right, is telling the authorities why the murders occurred. And he was quite clear about it. He said, this is revenge or shame or a combination of the two, really, because his parents caught him watching pornography the night before. That to me is so telling. I don't believe it to be true, but it might be true about the 15-year-old.
He might be projecting, right, his own issues onto his younger brother. Also, the fact that he said his younger brother committed suicide. I mean, a lot of times when you read about other shootings, especially Columbine, they did a lot of work to try to understand like how to prepare for the crime that they're committing. One of the first things that seems to be obvious is it's very hard to stage a suicide, especially with a firearm. So the fact that he's trying to pin a firearm suicide on his 13-year-old brother is also,
That's delusional. I mean, delusional. It's because, you would literally have to be an expert or have more knowledge to pull off, is it murder, is it suicide? I agree with you. So for this 15-year-old to try and pull it off is really reaching, especially when we'll discuss a little bit about what the coroner found, what the police found as far as wounds and all this other stuff, that it doesn't hold up, that the story doesn't, his version of events do not hold up. So, okay, back to the 911 calls, because this is very important in the timeline. Remember, the alleged shooter here makes the first call at 5 a.m., blaming it on the poor brother who is dead over there. 7 minutes later, authorities receive a 911 call from the neighbor. So this is the 11-year-old girl. And the neighbor is saying she's injured. Clearly, she's been shot. Yeah. She came to the home saying that her family has been shot by her 15-year-old brother. So this is the first on the record witness account. I am all about the 911 calls. And so this is the first of the reporting. Look, unless there's some weird collusion going on here, I believe the little girl.
Sure. Yeah, that would be a bizarre tale to tell at 11 years old, especially with life-threatening injuries.
Yes. So authorities obviously rushed to the scene because now there have been 2 calls about multiple shootings in this house. Authorities get there and the suspect, the 15-year-old, right, is in the driveway and he gets apprehended, and then the police walk into this house of horrors, and this carnage is just beyond. So they find the bodies of 5 slain members of this family all over the house. Father Mark was found at the bottom of the stairwell. He was shot 4 times. Mother Sarah was discovered in the bathroom, 2 bullets to the head. So let's get to the staging part of this, the alleged staging here. So according to authorities, the shooter staged the body of his younger brother to make it look like it was this murder-suicide plot. Investigators say that when they found Benjamin, this is the 13-year-old brother was shot, in his hand, he's holding a Glock. He's holding a Glock in his left hand, and he's also got a gunshot wound to the head. But investigators say that gun hadn't been fired and that Benjamin's head wound was not self-inflicted.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is where you're going to see the maturity level of the alleged perpetrator come into play here. I find it interesting that he pinned it on the younger brother, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's what's going to be interesting to unfold, because normally when we see family violence to this level, there's an issue with the parents, between the child and the parents. So why he didn't, and the most likely suspect in a family shooting is the father. So why he didn't think to try to pin it on the father, yet the younger brother, that's the interesting kind of criminological point to me, why he chose the child, not the father. But
well, there may be the genesis of whatever may have been troubling this young man could be in there, right? That could be the nucleus of it. We do not know. Now, the King County Medical Examiner's Office said that the fatal shot that killed Benjamin, the 13-year-old, would likely have been fired from more than 2 feet away. They can tell how close the gun was. And so, as far as the authorities are concerned, this 13-year-old did not kill himself, and therefore most likely is not the shooter of the other victims in this case. So, we still don't know motive here, other than I find it very insightful that the 15-year-old alleged shooter says, oh, it's my brother did it because he was watching porn and he got caught. So what has been discussed publicly is that this is from the little girl, the survivor, the 11-year-old. She said that there were challenges in the family with the older brother. Well, hello, obviously something's going on with this kid. She claims that the 15-year-old had been fighting with their parents about some exams that he failed, some school exams that he failed. Remember, he's being homeschooled. So, I mean, could that be part of this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, right. I looked through news reports before I came on here, and I was looking at some comments, and could it be mental illness? Right, we don't know yet. Could it be some sort of the onset of some sort of psychotic break? Who knows? Could it be some sort of privilege or delusion because of this kind of insulated lifestyle? But yeah, I mean, kids get upset. Like, where's the line, Anna? Like, kids get upset every day with their parents. They
Yes.
fail tests every day. They have parents who punish them for not doing well in school every day. Like, why do 1 in 10 million then resort to something like killing their family? I mean,
Right.
yeah, where's that line? Why did this happen? Right? That's what fascinates us all with these extreme crimes, because usually the behavior and the patterns that are existing in all of these families exist in all of ours. Why them, not us? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so, yeah, we're going to obviously follow this case to see, yeah, why him?
Why? Exactly. And it's true. That is what I find fascinating. People ask, like, where's the relatability to these cases? The thing is, we all have struggles in our life. We all have, whether we're going through a divorce, a custody battle, the kids aren't doing well in school, money issues, you name it. Your secret is about to be revealed. Every single one of us has a challenge in life, yet we handle it as best we can with whatever tools we have. 99% of the people never resort to this level of violence to solve a problem. And
Right.
that's where we as a community sit here and say, when did you think this was a good idea? Like,
Yeah.
how is this going to fix your problems? If you think your parents are mad at you, if you think you're in trouble for scoring badly on a test, let me tell you something. You're in some serious trouble now.
Right.
This is
Exactly.
worse than anything you could have ever imagined.
And the interesting thing is, this kind of behavior is on the increase. It's not on the decrease. It's not stable. Children killing their parents is increasing. The homicide rate for perpetrators between 10 and 17, that age category, is increasing. And so that's something that we are going to need to pay attention to. Why is the data over the last 5 to 10 years showing an increase in juvenile offenders of homicide?
That is really scaring me, Tracy.
Yeah.
Really scaring me. So the 15-year-old shooter has been charged with 5 counts of aggravated murder along with 1 count of attempted murder. That would be for his sister. According to the reporting of the Valley Record, an attorney for the accused killer says that his version of events, my brother did it, it wasn't me, is possible. In their words, quote, forensically viable because apparently the alleged shooter didn't appear to have blood on him. And the defense is questioning, how is it possible, if he is the shooter and he killed 5 people, how did he get out of that without being covered in blood?
The blood doesn't worry me as much. Was there no gunpowder residue on his
We
hand?
we would assume that his hands were bagged, have been tested. We don't have that information yet. So I cannot imagine that they would not have done that, right? So
Yeah.
that will be the most telling, will be gun residue. But just so everyone understands, that the defense is already working on this. They're going to support it was the 13-year-old, it wasn't this kid. And hey, if this was a bloody scene, how come he's not covered in blood? So we can see the defense is already building their case. Now, let's get to the house, the girl, and the forensics. The forensic evidence is still being tested. Has not been released. But here's what's interesting. So the children's maternal grandmother apparently is the trustee in this situation, because remember, everyone has been killed. And she has wanted to clean the house, right? To clean this carnage. But the defense has stopped it because they're asking for the murder scene to be preserved, for there to be more forensic testing. Not unreasonable. Frankly, I would like to know that crime scene was really absolutely every inch of that house, because you really want to know what happened here And if you're going to build a case for the murder of 5 people, you want to make sure your facts are right. So I can see that. Now,
You can also see the grandmother wanting to clean the house because maybe the 11-year-old wants to go in and get her favorite stuffed animal or her clothes or a photo of her parents. One thing I find in my students always find interesting, the Victims of Crime Act, VOCA, we call it, is provides provisions for victims of crime, including crime scene cleanup. People don't think about this. We think about victim compensation funds being given for therapy or being given for medical treatment, but it's both sad that it has to exist, but also useful that it does also pay for a professional crime scene cleanup, which can be quite costly.
And I think that's important. That really is, especially because not everyone has the means to get a new home. Homes are mortgages. It's not everyone has that kind of money at all. And
I'm sorry, a family shouldn't be burdened with cleaning up the blood and the aftermath of their loved one's murder. Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. So the little girl, in case you're all wondering, where is she? She's with her maternal grandmother. So, and imagine the pain of that grandma's going through. Grandma has lost her daughter, her precious daughter, and her grandchildren. And I'm sure she loved her son-in-law.
Right. And now she has to pull it together to support the 11-year-old. And also I have worked cases where a sibling has done something heinous. I've never worked a case where a sibling has killed their siblings, but the remaining family members also want to provide some level of support for the perpetrator. I'm sure she's going to want to visit. She might be furious. She might not want to, but I've seen in my experience, mostly my experience comes in rape cases. A sibling has raped a sibling or something of this nature, and the parent wants to go visit the perpetrator, but has to find a way to tell the victim, you're my priority, but I also need to visit your sibling. So this is also, it might not play out here. I have most of the cases I've worked where there's been a sibling relationship between the perpetrator and the victim. The parents, because again, it wasn't a murder, have been in a very difficult position where they want to visit the sibling that is being held, but they also don't want to upset the sibling that is living.
Right. Well, if I'm the grandmother, I'm grabbing my purse and my keys and I'm marching down there and I want to see my grandson and I want to ask him what the hell has just happened.
Right, exactly. So, but they have to explain to the 11-year-old girl, I need to see your brother because I need to figure out what's happening. But you're my primary responsibility. I support you. I'm on your team. But that's a very difficult position for that grandmother to be in.
Agreed. I think that's an excellent point. And, a few weeks ago, we had a case on here where a man was convicted of murdering his stepdaughter. And a lot of times when these things happen and there are, multiple families involved, one of the things that always upsets me is how, the family of the killer, let's say, rallies around the killer. When you're a parent, you love your child and there's nothing you could do about that. But what is always missing, or at least I find missing too much in our world, is the acknowledgement and the apology to say what you, my loved one, have done is so horrific, unbearable, disgusting. I will never forgive you for this, and my apologies to the family that has been impacted by this massive loss. There's not enough of that. It's the, rally around the killer thing. Have we lost our humanity? And, and this one's brutal because grandma has to take care of the lone survivor. And she herself has got to process the possibility that her grandson is a monster.
Yeah, you know what the issue? I remember learning this in when I was a a street level social worker with victims, sometimes we have to replace the word but with and. You're my grandson and I love you, but you killed my whole family and I am angry and you need to be accountable, right? And so those two things, that duality can exist, that you love someone who's done a heinous thing and you want them held accountable. And I think a lot of times in our society, we make people choose, right? And then I love you, but that's why I like to say, let's say I love you and you're wrong.
Yes, that's a good point. It's like a therapy session with you, Tracy. So still to be decided is how this young man will be held accountable. Will it be in a juvenile court? Will it be in a adult court? So just to remind everyone what the consequences here are. So if he's tried and found guilty as an adult, the sentence could be 25 years to life. And with 5 murders and you get counts on each, never going to see the light of day, nor should he if he is found guilty, in my opinion. However, if this happens as a minor, he could be done with his consequences at age 25?
Right. Yeah. And I won't go back down that other road, but the only point here I think that is important to put on the table is that's why there's the distinction between the adjudication, guilty or innocent, and then the punishment. The reason we try not to punish juveniles past whatever the age is in that state, in Washington happens to be 25, is because we think that they're more likely to be rehabilitated when we get them young. That punishment needs to be open to the determination of the court, who gets to hear all the facts that we don't get to hear, and from a philosophical point, is there a purpose in punishing children and adults differently?
I don't know.
Yeah, those are two different stories though.
What I can't figure out is why the next hearing to determine all this isn't going to be until June 4th. That's a long time.
Yeah. I don't know if the forensic team asked for it. I assume the defense asked for that because the defense wants the media to cool off a little bit because the media can put pressure on the prosecutor's office. So usually the defense will ask for a delay so that they can get the media to back down, cool off, and then the prosecutor can make a decision without media pressure. That's usually what happens.
And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of mental health evaluations by a bunch of experts on both sides. Like, I get that. It just seemed a little far because you've got 5 people dead here. And I guess they realize, well, the kid's not going anywhere, but it's still very, there needs to be justice here because that little girl, if she's the sole witness and she's going to have to
that's what
testify.
That's what made me want to. At first, when I saw the case, I'm like, I'm not sure this is for me. But the little girl, the path that she's going to have to follow now through the court process, I think, is what is fascinating about this. So again, that VOCA, we had no victims' rights before 1984, before VOCA comes to be. VOCA then creates this national standard. Hey, victims of crime need to be brought into the process. And that's where we had like victim impact statements, right? Everybody knows what those are now after the Larry Nassar case in particular. We have right to notification. Hey, somebody who has violently harmed you, you have a right to know that they're being released. And the victims also have a right to participate in any level of the case that they want. But you know what we haven't figured out? What does that mean? What does that look like when the victim's young?
I don't know, because she's going to have an advocate for her.
Right.
And so she's going to need an advocate, an attorney, an advocate. But doesn't the court appoint advocates for children?
No. Well, so she is a witness to the crime. That's how our criminal justice system looks at victims as witnesses. So she'll have a victim advocate from either the nonprofit world or the Office of Violence or the VOCA office in that state. But what they're going to do is provide her with support and connect her to mental health services. They may also be present with her during court proceedings. But the court is going to have to be very gentle with this. Most states allow for testimony. the child does not have to come into the courthouse. They can go into a counseling center and have closed caption TV record their testimony. Now with Zoom, you can interact with the judge while being in a place that you consider safe. So they're going to have to take a lot of provisions with her being their lead witness in ensuring that her mental health is prioritized.
Yeah, my hope is, and we've seen this, and these are really more recent changes. And by recent, we're talking just maybe 2 decades, where, thank goodness, the criminal justice system has figured out that when you have such a young victim, you do not want to continue to traumatize them. So those initial interrogations, if you will, are recorded and handled by experts to gather as much evidence as possible. And from the child's perspective, what they saw, what they heard, what they experienced. And hopefully that in its entirety is what holds as the child's testimony that doesn't have to happen again.
Right. Yeah, we try to get it like a all-in-one process so that the child does not have to repeat themselves more than twice. They do have to give testimony to both the investigator, and then they're going to have to give testimony in the court process. And so, but we are trying to minimize. An adult might be called into a police department to continue to give accounts 4 or 5 times, which is trauma. When I used to be a sexual assault victim advocate, that would be traumatizing for my client to show up 4 or 5 times with these interrogations by the police department. But with children, we try to minimize it. You're going to get it done all in one day at the investigation stage, and then you're going to try to get it done all in one day at the trial stage. Now, keep in mind, the defense has a right to cross-examine this witness. And I have been in court years ago. Hopefully it's changed. I haven't worked in the courts in about 18 years. But years ago, a defense attorney would lay into a child, come at a child very hard to get the child to, misspeak or to stumble or to contradict themselves. There are provisions now in place to attempt to reduce that.
Oh, God, that turns my stomach, certainly in a case like this. Well, we will be watching this case to figure out which court will finally hear it and what the determination will be. It is a massive tragedy, and the fact that we are looking at the accused killer being just 15 years old, it's just a tragedy.
Sure.
Tragedy.
And again, I hate to remind you that these cases are increasing. The young murder offenders are increasing.
So, Tracy, I do want to talk to you about a project that you're working on. You were in Italy this summer, and I thought you were teaching remotely, but you weren't. You were doing something else.
Yeah, so I'm very excited. Many countries in the European Union have been updating their violence against women laws to parallel our Violence Against Women Act. Our act came out in 1994, right? Many, many years ago. In the last 5 to 10 years, a bunch of legislation has emerged in the European Union. There was an Istanbul Convention to make sure victims of stalking, trafficking, sexual abuse, domestic violence had more resources, and that law enforcement were taking the crimes more seriously. And so I was involved in a conference looking at how some laws in Italy, again, but they're in all of the European Union. It's just Italy is where I do my research in addition to the US. And so we're looking to update what's called the Codice Rosso, which is a law that looks to bring attention to domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, etc. And so kind of what I'm doing as the American criminologist is saying, hey, we did this 20 years ago, 30 years ago. We had a couple of stumbling blocks. We made a couple of failures. If you have the opportunity to go in at the ground floor and start the policies and processes, here's what we got wrong and took us 20 years to correct. So maybe you could learn from our mistakes. So I've been providing them with research and data and laws and cases so that they can learn from our mistakes.
Wow, this is so fascinating. Is there anything that's very unique, let's say, the Italian government and Italian laws as to how they look at those cases versus how we look at those cases?
Yeah, there's so many things, but but the most interesting thing for me is there's not a lot of discretion at the investigative level in Italy. So any case brought to the police department needs to go to the prosecutor's office. Where in the United States, if you bring a complaint, domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, to a police department, the police can choose to proceed, to not proceed.
Uh-huh.
And the police in Italy don't have that authority, and they must bring the case to the prosecutor's office to determine. That's good, right? Because then you're having somebody with a law degree who's a little bit more removed, making a judgment that is supposedly more objective. The problem also, though, is it kind of backs up the system a little bit more. So a prosecutor needs to review even low-level cases that a police department might have been able to move along in another manner or dismiss because there wasn't enough evidence to proceed.
I find it fascinating that their approach on how a complaint is received and treated is different than ours. How would you say, in comparing the two societies, how women are viewed, or men, when it comes to domestic violence? Is there enough compassion there?
Sure, sure. So it's very difficult. So there's many. I mean, we're both Western countries with a similar, democratic principles and a similar criminal justice system in terms of law enforcement, prosecutors, judges. But yeah, the sentiment I always say like Italian political and social sentiment is about 20 years behind the US. So women are still trying to achieve legal rights that we've achieved, 20 years prior. But there's another thing. Their criminal justice system, their constitution, excuse me, comes after World War II. So we're actually an older country, the United States. So many of the European countries' constitutions come after World War II. So they built into their constitution human rights.
Uh,
And so this respect for the human being, this dignity, etc. This is why they don't have things like the death penalty or rehabilitation is prioritized over traditional punishment. So in some ways, it's a much more humanistic approach. They do have lower crime rates, so maybe it works. But I always say to my students, keep in mind, our system is much older. People got to learn from our mistakes. So when they created their constitutions, they got to actually put in a much more progressive constitution that gave women the right to vote immediately, that did not have slavery. So a lot of the European countries, because their constitution is formed after World War II, they were able to put some progressive measures that took us years post the development of our Constitution.
I always feel, Tracy, when you join us, that we all get an education. It's like we're all taking a university course with you, which is wonderful. And you get to do it for free.
Thank you. I love it. I love it. And I love your audience, and I really appreciate their comments and feedback. It gives me more ideas, and it also helps me to learn how to connect with more people, how to present ideas so that more people can hear them and more people can join conversations. I think started with, we just got to communicate more. We don't have to be right or wrong. There doesn't have to be one perfect idea or one completely wrong idea. Like, let's just communicate about a bunch of complex issues.
Yes. And that's what I love about our YouTube community. It is a really respectful place. We have divergent views. People can express themselves, frustration, compassion, all of these things. But, everyone gets a chance to have this conversation. And I love how everyone talks with each other, and then I join in, and it's really, I learn a lot. I honestly do. I learn a lot, or I think, oh, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I ask that question? It's like, oh, so for me, it's also an education. So Dr. Tracy Tamborra, I know you don't have a big social media footprint, but where can people find you or follow you?
So I do. You forced me to have Instagram, and then my daughter had to set it up. I post when I've come on here. I put it on there, but that's about as good as I get. I'm sorry, but yes, Tracy.Tamborra at Instagram. I don't know if that's
at Instagram.
How do you say it?
I love you. You're precious.
Or yeah,
It's like on the TikTok and on the Facebook.
yeah. And then my faculty webpage at the University of New Haven lists, I've written a book about victimization. I have lots of research on it. You can find all that there.
Okay, that's terrific. We love that. You can find me at Anna G News. You can find this episode, all our episodes, wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where we have this really vibrant, active, vocal community, and also on social media too. And sign up to receive our newsletter at truecrimenews.com. So until next week, I'm your host, Ana Garcia, and this is True Crime News, the podcast.